When a billionaire calls a single father to fix her fence, she has no idea he's about to rebuild her entire life. If you want to see how a handyman and a CEO save each other from falling apart, stay with me until the end. And don't forget to hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The phone rang at 6 in the morning, which meant it was either an emergency or someone who didn't respect boundaries. Daniel Mercer figured it was probably both. He reached across the cluttered nightstand, knocking over an empty water glass in the process, and squinted at the screen. Unknown number. He answered anyway because unknown numbers sometimes paid the bills. This Daniel Mercer? A woman's voice. Clipped, professional. The kind of voice that didn't waste time on pleasantries. Yeah, who's this? Victoria Hale, I need a fence repaired. Can you come today? Daniel sat up, rubbing his eyes. Victoria Hale. Even half asleep, he recognized the name. Everyone in the county did. She owned half the tech companies on the East Coast and had a reputation for being colder than a January morning. He'd never met her, but he had driven past her estate a few times. Massive iron gates, manicured hedges, the kind of place that made you feel poor just looking at it. Today's tight, Daniel said. I've got a job finishing up this afternoon, and then I need to pick up my son from school. I'll pay double your rate. He paused. Double meant he could cover Noah's field trip fees and maybe fix the truck's alignment. Double meant breathing room. What time? 9. Don't be late. She hung up before he could respond. Daniel stared at the phone for a moment, then swung his legs out of bed. His back protested immediately. 32 wasn't supposed to feel like 50, but years of construction work and carrying a 9-year-old on his shoulders had a way of adding up. He grabbed a pair of jeans from the chair, pulled on a flannel shirt that smelled like sawdust, and headed downstairs. Noah was already awake, sitting at the kitchen table with a bowl of cereal and a library book propped against the milk carton. His dark hair stuck up in 3 different directions, and his glasses were smudged with fingerprints. Morning, bud. Noah looked up and grinned. Morning, Dad. You look tired. Thanks for noticing. Daniel poured himself coffee from the pot he'd set up the night before. It was lukewarm and bitter, but it was caffeine. Got a job this morning, big one. You good getting yourself ready for school? Yeah. Noah shoveled another spoonful of cereal into his mouth. Can Tommy come over this weekend? Maybe. Let me talk to his mom. She likes you. Daniel raised an eyebrow. What's that supposed to mean? She smiles a lot when you pick me up. Like, a lot. Eat your breakfast. Noah laughed, and Daniel felt the knot in his chest loosen slightly. That laugh, it was the only thing that mattered. Everything else, the bills, the exhaustion, the loneliness that crept in late at night, it all faded when Noah laughed. By 8:30, Daniel had dropped Noah at school, loaded his tools into the truck, and started the drive toward the Hale estate. The roads got quieter the farther he went, the houses bigger, the lawns more ridiculous. He turned onto a private road lined with oak trees and eventually reached the gates. They opened automatically, which felt vaguely unsettling, like the house was watching him. The driveway curved through perfectly landscaped grounds. Flower beds that looked like they'd been arranged by a mathematician. Fountains that served no purpose except to show off. The house itself was enormous, all glass and stone, the kind of architecture that screamed, I have more money than I know what to do with. Daniel parked near the side entrance and grabbed his toolbox. Before he could knock, the door opened. Victoria Hale stood there, and she looked exactly like her reputation. Mid-30s, sharp suit, dark hair pulled back so tight it could have been painful. Her expression was neutral, bordering on cold, and her eyes scanned him like she was calculating his net worth. You're early, she said. Thought that was a good thing. It is. Follow me. She turned without waiting for a response and walked through the house. Daniel followed, trying not to gawk at the ridiculous interior, marble floors, abstract art that probably cost more than his truck, a chandelier that looked like it belonged in a museum. They passed through a sitting room where a young girl sat curled up on a couch with a book. She looked up briefly, and Daniel caught a glimpse of intelligent eyes and a guarded expression before Victoria led him outside. The backyard was just as excessive as the front. Perfectly trimmed grass, a pool that could have hosted the Olympics, and, at the far edge of the property, a tall wooden fence that looked like it had seen better days. Part of it was leaning inward, and several boards were splintered. That's the fence? Victoria said. A tree fell during the last storm. I need it repaired. Replaced, if necessary. Bay, ish potite. Daniel walked over and crouched beside it, running his hand along the damaged section. The wood was soft in places, rotting from the inside out. He pulled at one of the boards, and it came away easily. This wasn't just the storm, he said. The whole thing's rotting. Been that way for a while. Victoria frowned. The landscaping company inspects it every year, but then they're not doing their job. Daniel stood and gestured along the fence line. You've got water damage here, termites over there, and half these posts aren't set deep enough. If I just patch the broken section, the rest is going to fall apart in 6 months. How long to replace it? A week, maybe more, depending on weather. Victoria's jaw tightened. She didn't like that answer. Fine, do it. I'll need a deposit. I'll have my assistant transfer the funds this afternoon. She turned to leave, then paused. And don't disturb my daughter. She's homeschooled and needs quiet to work. Got it. Victoria walked back toward the house without another word, her heels clicking against the stone path. Daniel watched her go, then looked back at the fence. It was a mess, but he'd seen worse. He set down his toolbox and got to work. By noon, he'd torn out the damaged section and started measuring for new posts. The sun was brutal, even in early autumn, and sweat dripped down his back. He was so focused on leveling a post that he didn't notice the girl until she spoke. You're fixing the fence. Daniel looked up. This girl from earlier stood a few feet away, watching him with the same guarded expression. She looked about 12, maybe 13, with dark hair like her mother's, and a seriousness that didn't quite fit her age. That's the plan, Daniel said. It's been broken for months. Mom kept saying she'd call someone, but she never did. Well, she called me. The girl tilted her head. Are you good at it? At fixing fences? Yeah, I'm decent. Nah. She considered this, then sat down on the grass a safe distance away. I'm Lily. Daniel. Do you have kids? One, a son. He's 9. Does he like you? The question caught him off guard. I hope so. Why? Because some kids don't like their parents. Lily pulled at a blade of grass. My dad doesn't live here anymore. He lives in the city. I see him every other weekend, but mostly he just talks on his phone. Daniel didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded and went back to work. Lily stayed where she was, watching him in silence. After a while, she spoke again. Mom says you're a handyman. Oh, that's right. What does that mean? It means I fix things. Like what? Fences, cabinets, leaky pipes, whatever needs fixing. Can you fix people? Daniel stopped and looked at her. She wasn't joking. Her expression was completely serious. No, he said quietly. I can't fix people. Oh, that's too bad. Lily stood and brushed off her jeans. Mom could use some fixing. She walked back toward the house before Daniel could respond. He stared after her, feeling something uncomfortable settle in his chest. Then he turned back to the fence and kept working. Over the next 3 days, Daniel fell into a rhythm. He'd arrive at 8, work until mid-afternoon, then leave to pick up Noah from school. Victoria barely acknowledged him. She'd come outside once or twice to check his progress, nod, and disappear back inside. Lily, on the other hand, showed up every day. She'd sit on the grass with a book or a notebook and ask him questions. Why did you become a handyman? Needed work. Needed to be around for my son. Where's his mom? Daniel hesitated. She passed away a few years ago. Lily looked up from her notebook. I'm sorry. Me too. Do you miss her? Every day. She nodded and went back to writing. Daniel didn't ask what she was working on. He got the sense that Lily didn't talk much to most people, and he didn't want to push. On the 4th day, Noah came with him. It was a teacher work day, and Daniel didn't have anyone to watch him. Noah spent the morning exploring the property, wide-eyed at the pool and the fountains, and eventually found Lily sitting under a tree. Hi, Noah said. I'm Noah. Lily looked up. I'm Lily. Do you live here? Yeah, That's so cool. Do you have a trampoline? No. Oh, Noah sat down beside her. What are you reading? The Hobbit. Else, I love that book. Bilbo's my favorite. Who's yours? And just like that, they were talking. Daniel glanced over from time to time and saw them laughing together. Noah gesturing wildly while Lily smiled, a real smile, not the guarded expression she usually wore. It made something in Daniel's chest tighten. That afternoon, Victoria came outside while Daniel was loading tools into his truck. She watched Noah and Lily sitting together on the grass, and for the first time her expression softened. "Your son is very friendly," she said. "Yeah, he doesn't know a stranger. Lily doesn't usually talk to people. Noah has that effect." Victoria was quiet for a moment. She's been through a lot. The divorce was difficult. Daniel nodded, but didn't push. He'd learned a long time ago that people told you what they needed to when they were ready. "I'll be back tomorrow to finish the posts," he said. "Thank you." It was the first time she'd said that. She's... The following week, everything started to fall apart. Daniel arrived Monday morning to find Victoria pacing in the driveway, her phone pressed to her ear. Her voice was low and sharp, the kind of tone that meant someone was about to get fired. She didn't acknowledge him, so he went straight to work. By midday, she was still on the phone. By late afternoon, she was sitting on the back porch with her head in her hands. Daniel hesitated, then walked over. "Everything okay?" "Mriki, yafa." Yeah. Victoria looked up, and for a split second he saw something in her expression, fear, maybe, or exhaustion. Then it was gone, replaced by the usual mask. "It's fine. Doesn't look fine." "I said it's fine." Daniel held up his hands. "All right, just asking." He turned to leave, but she spoke again. "My board is trying to force me out." He stopped. "Out of your own company?" "Yes." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Apparently I'm too difficult to work with, too focused on vision instead of profit margins. They want someone more compliant." "That's bullshit." "Yes, it is." She rubbed her temples. "And my ex-husband is using it as ammunition. He's filing for custody of Lily, claiming I'm too unstable to be a proper parent." Daniel sat down on the porch step. "Can he do that?" "He can try. He has lawyers, money, and a lot of people who think a billionaire CEO couldn't possibly be a good mother." "What do you think?" She looked at him sharply. "What?" I asked what you think, not what they think you." "Well..." Victoria stared at him for a long moment. "I think I'm exhausted. I think I built something from nothing, and now people want to tear it apart because I didn't smile enough in meetings. I think my daughter barely knows me because I've been too busy fighting to keep everything together." Her voice cracked slightly. "And I think I don't know how to fix any of it." Daniel didn't say anything. He just sat there, and after a while, Victoria exhaled slowly. "Sorry," she said. "That was unprofessional. You're allowed to be human." She glanced at him, something unreadable in her eyes. "Most people don't see it that way. Most people are idiots." Well, that got a faint smile. "You're not what I expected." "What'd you expect?" "I don't know. Someone who'd just do the job and leave." "I am doing the job," Daniel said. "But I'm also a person, and you look like you could use one of those right now." Victoria didn't respond, but she didn't leave either. They sat there in silence while the sun dipped lower, and for the first time in a long time, Daniel got the sense that someone else understood what it felt like to carry too much weight alone. Inside the house, Lily and Noah were laughing about something, their voices drifting through the open window. Victoria listened, and Daniel saw her shoulders relax just slightly. "Your son is good for her," she said quietly. "She's good for him, too." Victoria nodded. Then she stood, smoothing her suit jacket like she was putting the armor back on. "Thank you, Daniel." "For what?" "For not treating me like I'm made of glass." She walked back inside, and Daniel sat there for a moment longer, staring at the half-finished fence. Then he picked up his tools and got back to work. The next 2 weeks were chaos. Victoria's board scheduled an emergency shareholder vote, and suddenly the estate was full of lawyers, assistants, and people in expensive suits who barely glanced at Daniel. He kept working on the fence, kept his head down, and watched everything unravel from the edges. Lily stopped coming outside. Noah asked about her constantly, and Daniel didn't know what to say. He'd see her sometimes through the windows, sitting alone in her room, and it reminded him too much of the months after his wife died, when Noah had stopped talking, stopped smiling, stopped being a kid. One afternoon, Daniel finished the last section of fence and went to find Victoria. She was in her office, surrounded by paperwork, her expression hollow. "Fence is done," he said. She didn't look up. "Good. Send me the invoice." "Victoria." She finally met his eyes, and he saw how close to breaking she was. "You need help," Daniel said. "I have lawyers. I don't mean that kind of help." He stepped into the room. "You're carrying all of this alone, and it's tearing you apart. Let someone stand beside you." "Why would you do that?" "Because I know what it's like to lose everything, and I know what it's like to rebuild." He paused. "You don't have to do this alone." Victoria stared at him, and for the first time the armor cracked. Her eyes filled with tears, and she looked away quickly, trying to hide it. "I don't know how to ask for help," she whispered. "You just did." She took a shaky breath, and Daniel pulled a chair over and sat down. "All right, let's figure this out." And they did. For the next week, Daniel helped her organize documents, track down old investors who still believed in her vision, and build a case that wasn't just about profit. It was about the company she'd built, the people she'd employed, the future she'd imagined. He didn't know anything about corporate strategy, but he knew how to work hard, how to stay focused, and how to not give up when things looked impossible. Lily started coming downstairs again. She and Noah spent hours together, and slowly she started talking to her mother more. Not about the lawsuit or the board, but about books, about school, about the little things that had been buried under all the pressure. One night, after Noah and Lily had fallen asleep watching a movie, Victoria and Daniel sat on the back porch. The fence stood solid and straight in the moonlight. "It looks good," Victoria said. "Thanks." "I meant what you did, not just the fence, everything else." Daniel shrugged. "You did the hard part. I just helped carry it." She looked at him, and something shifted between them, something neither of them said out loud, but both of them felt. "The vote is tomorrow," she said quietly. "You ready?" "No, but I'll do it anyway." "That's all you can do, and..." Victoria nodded, and they sat there together, two people who'd spent too long holding everything alone, finally learning what it meant to let someone else share the weight. Tomorrow would bring answers. Tonight, they had this. And for now, that was enough. The morning of the vote arrived with the kind of silence that felt like waiting for a storm. Daniel woke at 5, couldn't fall back asleep, and ended up sitting at his kitchen table with cold coffee while Noah snored softly upstairs. His phone buzzed around 6:30. Victoria's name lit up the screen. "Hey," he answered. "I can't do this." Her voice was tight, barely controlled. "I've been awake all night going through the numbers, and I keep finding holes. Things I missed. They're going to tear me apart in there." "Where are you?" "My office. I've been here since midnight." "Have you eaten?" Silence. Victoria. "I'm not hungry." "That's not what I asked." Daniel stood and grabbed his keys. "I'm coming over. You don't need to. I'm already out the door." He hung up before she could argue, left a note for Noah explaining he'd be back before school, and drove through the empty pre-dawn streets. The gates to the estate opened automatically, and he found Victoria exactly where he expected, sitting behind her desk surrounded by papers, her suit wrinkled, her hair falling out of its usual tight arrangement. She looked like she'd been fighting a war alone for days. "When's the meeting?" Daniel asked. 10, just. That gives us 3 hours. He started gathering papers into organized stacks. "You're not going in there running on fumes and panic. First, we're getting food in you. Then we're going through this one more time, slowly." "Daniel, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but nothing. You hired me to fix a fence, and I did that. Now, I'm here because I want to be, and you need someone who isn't going to bullshit you." He met her eyes. "So let me help." Victoria stared at him for a long moment, and something in her expression cracked. "Okay." They worked through breakfast, toast and eggs that Daniel made in her absurdly large kitchen, while she protested that she didn't have time. He made her eat anyway, and they went back through her presentation line by line. She knew the material cold, but exhaustion had made her doubt herself, second-guess every number, every projection. Stop, Daniel said after she'd questioned the same slide 3 times. You built this company from scratch. You know it better than anyone in that room. They're trying to make you feel small because they're scared of what happens if you stay big. What if they're right? What if I am too difficult, too focused on the wrong things? Then you're difficult, so what? Daniel leaned forward. You think the people who change things do it by being easy? By making everyone comfortable? They do it by being stubborn and unreasonable and refusing to settle. He paused. Your board wants someone compliant. You know what compliant gets you? Mediocrity. Safe. Boring. Forgettable mediocrity. Victoria exhaled slowly. You're surprisingly good at this. At what? Talking people off ledges. Had practice. Daniel thought of the months after Sarah died when he'd wake up every morning and have to convince himself there was a reason to get out of bed. You learn what works. By 9, Victoria looked steadier. Still exhausted, but steadier. She'd redone her hair, changed into a fresh suit, and the hollow look in her eyes had been replaced by something sharper, focused. Thank you, she said as Daniel walked her to the car. Go show them why they're wrong. She nodded and drove off, and Daniel stood there in the driveway feeling useless. He'd done what he could, but now it was out of his hands. He headed home, got Noah to school, and spent the rest of the morning trying to distract himself with work. It didn't help. Around 1, his phone rang. We won. Victoria's voice was shaking. The investors voted to keep me, 73%. Daniel let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. Told you. I need to call my lawyers, handle the press. There's so much to do. She paused. But I wanted to tell you first. Something warm settled in Daniel's chest. I'm glad. Can you come by tonight? I want to talk. Not about business, just talk. Yeah, I'll bring Noah. Good. Lily will be happy. After she hung up, Daniel sat in his truck for a while, staring at the phone. He wasn't sure what was happening between them, wasn't even sure he wanted to name it, but it felt significant, complicated, real. That evening, he and Noah showed up at the estate with takeout pizza because Victoria had admitted over text that her kitchen was full of expensive equipment she never used. They ate in the backyard, the 4 of them sitting on the grass near the newly rebuilt fence, and for the first time since Daniel had met her, Victoria looked relaxed. Not perfect, just present. Tell me about your wife, she said after Noah and Lily had run off to explore the gardens. Daniel hadn't expected that. Why? Because you've helped me through the worst month of my life, and I barely know anything about you except that you're good at building things and your son thinks you're a superhero. He smiled faintly. I don't know about superhero. He told Lily you can fix anything. He's 9. He still believes in magic. Victoria waited, and Daniel realized she wasn't going to let this go. Her name was Sarah, he said finally. We met in college, got married young, had Noah right after. She was a teacher, 2nd grade, loved it. He picked at the grass. She got sick when Noah was 6, cancer. It moved fast. By the time they caught it, there wasn't much they could do. I'm sorry. Everyone says that. Daniel didn't mean it harshly, but the words came out flat. It doesn't help. No, it doesn't. They sat in silence for a while, and then Victoria spoke again. Richard, my ex, he didn't want kids. I did. We fought about it for years, and finally, I just went ahead, got pregnant. Told him after. She laughed bitterly. Not my finest moment. He stayed, but he resented her. Resented me. When Lily was 4, he left. Said he'd tried, but he couldn't pretend anymore. That's a shit thing to do. Yeah, yes, it was. Victoria pulled her knees to her chest. Lily asked me once if it was her fault. If she'd been different, maybe he would have stayed. I told her no, but I don't think she believed me. Kids always think it's their fault. Did Noah? Yeah. Daniel's throat tightened. After Sarah died, he stopped talking for 3 months. Just shut down. I took him to doctors, therapists, everyone. Nothing worked. And then one night, he finally said it out loud. Asked if maybe Mom got sick because he'd been bad, because he hadn't cleaned his room or listened or done his homework. He shook his head. I told him that wasn't how the world worked, but he was 7. How do you explain that sometimes terrible things just happen and there's no reason? Victoria didn't answer. She didn't need to. From somewhere in the garden, Noah's laugh echoed, followed by Lily's quieter one. Daniel watched them appear around the hedge, racing each other toward the house, and felt that familiar ache in his chest, the one that said this moment was good, but it wouldn't last. Nothing ever did. He's happy here, Victoria said softly. So's Lily. I don't want to mess this up. Daniel turned to look at her. Mess what up? She met his eyes, and he saw the vulnerability there, the fear of saying too much, risking too much. This, whatever this is, I don't know what this is either, Daniel admitted, but I don't think we're messing it up. Yet. Victoria smiled slightly, and they sat there until the sun started to set and Noah came running back, demanding to know if they could stay for dessert. The next few days felt almost normal. Daniel finished up a couple of small jobs around town, Noah went to school, and in the evenings, they'd head over to the estate. Sometimes it was just for an hour. Sometimes they'd stay until dark. Lily and Noah were inseparable, building forts in the living room and staging elaborate games that involved far too much running and shouting for Victoria's pristine house. They're going to break something, Victoria said one night as a lamp wobbled dangerously. Probably, Daniel agreed. She didn't stop them, but the peace didn't last long. On Thursday, Victoria's lawyer called with news that made her face go pale. Daniel was fixing a loose cabinet hinge in the kitchen when she walked in, phone still in her hand. Richard filed the custody petition, she said. Officially. The hearing is in 3 weeks. Daniel set down his screwdriver. What's his case? That I'm unstable, that my professional life is in chaos and I can't provide a safe, consistent environment for Lily. Her voice shook slightly. He's arguing that the board vote proves I'm combative and difficult to work with, and that it's affecting my ability to parent. That's insane, right? It doesn't matter if it's insane. He has lawyers who'll make it sound reasonable. She sank into a chair. And the worst part is, he's not entirely wrong. I've been so focused on saving the company that I've barely seen her. I don't know what she's reading, who her friends are, what she worries about at night. I don't know my own daughter. Yes, you do. How can you say that? Because I've watched you with her. Daniel pulled out a chair and sat across from her. You notice when she's upset. You make sure she eats. You don't hover. But you're always there when she needs you. That's what parenting is. Not perfection. Just showing up. It doesn't feel like enough. It never does. Victoria rubbed her temples. I can't lose her, Daniel. The company, the board, all of it. I'd give it up in a heartbeat. But if Richard takes her, he won't. You don't know that. What? No. But I know you're not going to let him without a fight. She looked at him, and something passed between them, an understanding that went deeper than words. They'd both lost too much already. They both knew what it meant to fight for what mattered. Help me, Victoria said quietly. I don't know how to do this. We start by talking to Lily. Victoria's eyes widened. She's 12, and she's not stupid. She knows something's wrong. Daniel leaned forward. If you try to protect her from this, she's just going to fill in the blanks herself. And kids always imagine worse than the truth. What do I say? The truth, that her dad wants to change the custody arrangement, that you're going to fight it, that no matter what happens, you love her and you're not going anywhere. Victoria looked terrified. What if she wants to live with him? Then you deal with it, but you don't assume the worst before you even ask. That night, Victoria sat down with Lily in the living room while Daniel and Noah waited in the kitchen. He couldn't hear the words, but he heard the tone. Victoria's voice low and careful, Lily's responses quiet at first, then louder. At one point, he heard Lily shout something, and then a door slammed upstairs. Victoria came into the kitchen looking shattered. She's angry, she said. At you? At both of us. At the whole situation. Victoria sank into a chair. She said she doesn't want to choose, that it's not fair to make her pick sides. She's right. I know. Victoria's voice cracked. But what am I supposed to do? If the judge asks her, Then you tell the judge what you just told me, that you don't want her to choose, that you want what's best for her, even if that's hard to hear. What if what's best for her isn't me? Daniel didn't have an answer for that. Instead, he reached across the table and took her hand. She gripped it tightly, and they sat there in silence until Noah wandered in, asking if it was time to go home. Over the next 2 weeks, the tension in the house grew thick. Lily stopped talking to Victoria about anything beyond logistics. What's for dinner? When's my tutoring session? Do I have clean clothes? She wasn't cruel, just distant, and Daniel could see it eating Victoria alive. Richard started showing up unannounced, always polite, always with some excuse about needing to discuss scheduling or paperwork. But his presence felt like a power play, a reminder that he could walk into this house whenever he wanted, because legally, Lily was still half his. Daniel met him only once. He'd been replacing a rotted board on the back deck when Richard strolled out, all expensive suit and perfectly styled hair. "You must be the handyman," Richard said, his tone making it clear what he thought of that. "Daniel." "Richard, Lily's father." He glanced at the deck. "Fixing things around here, I see." Victoria always did have a habit of letting things fall apart. Daniel set down his hammer. "Sounds like you'd know." Richard's smile didn't reach his eyes. "I'm just saying, it's a lot of house for one person to manage. A lot of responsibility. Some people aren't built for it. And some people walk away when it gets hard." The smile vanished. "Careful. You don't know anything about me." "I know enough." Richard stared at him for a long moment, then turned and walked back inside. Daniel watched him go, his jaw tight. He didn't trust the guy. Didn't like the way he talked about Victoria like she was incompetent, or the way he looked at Lily like she was a trophy he'd misplaced. That evening, Daniel found Lily sitting alone by the fence, staring out at the trees beyond the property line. He sat down beside her without saying anything. After a while, she spoke. "Do you think my mom's a bad parent?" "No. My dad says she is. Says she cares more about work than me." Daniel chose his words carefully. "I think your mom cares about you more than anything. But I also think she spent a lot of time trying to prove she could do everything on her own, and maybe she forgot it's okay to ask for help. She never asks for help. She's learning." Lily pulled at the grass. "Dad wants me to live with him. He said it'd be better. That I could go to a real school, have friends, do normal stuff. What do you want?" "Bishki ba ambopo pokiki." "I don't know." Her voice was small. "I don't want to hurt anyone." "You're not responsible for their feelings, Lily. You're 12. You're supposed to be worrying about homework and what book to read next, not whether your parents are going to be okay." "But they won't be. No matter what I choose, someone's going to be upset." Daniel didn't argue because she was right. "Yeah, probably. But that's on them to deal with, not you." "Yes, yes, I see it." Lily looked at him, her eyes bright with tears. "I don't want to leave. I don't want to leave Mom or Noah or... She trailed off. "Or... I don't know. Everything. It feels safe here now. It didn't before, but it does now." She wiped her eyes. "Is that stupid?" "No, it's not stupid." She leaned against his shoulder and Daniel sat there quietly, feeling the weight of a kid who was carrying too much. After a while, Noah came running out looking for them, and Lily straightened up, wiping her face quickly. "Want to play cards?" Noah asked. Lily nodded, and they ran off together. Daniel stayed where he was, staring at the fence he'd built. It looked solid, strong, the kind of thing that could withstand pressure. He hoped the people inside the house could do the same. The hearing was set for Monday morning, and the weekend before felt like holding your breath underwater. Victoria was a wreck, snapping at assistants, obsessively reviewing documents, barely sleeping. Daniel spent most of Saturday with her, going over testimony, helping her organize evidence of her involvement in Lily's life. Photos, school records, emails. Proof that she wasn't the absentee parent Richard's lawyers were painting her as. "What if it's not enough?" Victoria asked for the 10th time. "Then we find more." "There isn't more. This is it." Daniel looked at her. "You're spiraling." "I'm being realistic." "No, you're panicking, and I get it, but it's not helping." He stood and pulled her to her feet. "Come on, we're taking a break." "Daniel, I can't." "Yeah, you can. 5 minutes, outside, fresh air." He practically dragged her out to the backyard, where Noah and Lily were kicking a soccer ball around. The evening sun was golden, the air cool, and for a moment, everything felt still. "She's happy," Daniel said quietly. "Look at her. That's what matters. Not the lawyers or the hearing or what Richard thinks. Her." Victoria watched Lily laugh as Noah tripped over the ball, and her expression softened. "I don't know how to protect her from this." "You can't, but you can show her it's okay to be scared and fight anyway. Is that what you did? After your wife died?" Daniel nodded. "Every single day. Some days I didn't think I'd make it. But Noah needed me to, so I did." He paused. "You'll do the same." Victoria looked at him, and her eyes filled with tears. "I'm terrified. I know. What if I lose?" "Then we figure out what comes next. Together." She stared at him, and something shifted in her expression, something vulnerable and raw. "Why are you doing this?" "Because I care about you." The words came out before Daniel could stop them, and he saw her inhale sharply. "I care about Lily. I care about what happens to all of you. And maybe that's stupid, maybe it's too fast, but it's true." Victoria didn't say anything for a long moment. Then she stepped forward and kissed him. It wasn't desperate or dramatic. It was quiet, almost careful, like she was testing whether this was real. Daniel kissed her back, his hand coming up to cup her face, and for just a few seconds, the rest of the world disappeared. When they pulled apart, Victoria's eyes were bright. "That was probably a terrible idea," she whispered. "Probably. I don't care." "Me neither." And they stood there, foreheads touching, and Daniel felt something in his chest unlock, a door he'd kept closed since Sarah died, afraid of what it meant to let someone in again. From across the yard, Noah shouted, "Dad, come play!" Daniel stepped back, his hand lingering on Victoria's for just a moment longer. "Duty calls." She smiled, a real smile, not the practiced one she wore for the world. "Go." All right. He jogged over to the kids, and they spent the next hour playing a chaotic game that involved way too many made-up rules and not enough actual soccer. Victoria watched from the porch, and when Daniel glanced over, she was still smiling. For the first time in weeks, something felt right. But the moment didn't last. That night, after they'd put the kids to bed and Daniel was getting ready to leave, Victoria's phone rang. She answered, listened for 30 seconds, and went pale. "What?" Daniel asked. "Richard's lawyer just filed an emergency motion. They're claiming I'm having an inappropriate relationship with an employee and that it's affecting my judgment." Her voice was shaking. "They're using you, Daniel. They're going to argue that I'm unfit because I'm involved with the help." Daniel felt his stomach drop. It doesn't matter if it's true, it's ammunition." She looked at him, stricken. "I'm sorry, we shouldn't have." "Stop. They're going to destroy me with this. Then we don't let them." Daniel stepped closer. "We tell the truth. That you hired me to fix a fence. And yeah, we became friends. And yeah, maybe it's more than that now, but it doesn't change the fact that you're a good mother. You don't understand how these things work." "You're right, I don't. But I know this. If you back down now, if you let them make you feel ashamed for caring about someone, they win." He took her hands. "So we fight. We tell them exactly what happened, and we don't apologize for it." Victoria stared at him, and he saw the fear in her eyes. Not of losing the case, but of dragging him into the mess with her. "I can't ask you to do that," she said. "You're not asking. I'm offering. Daniel, I'm not going anywhere." She closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, they were filled with tears. "Okay. Okay." They stood there in the darkened hallway, holding on to each other like they were the only solid things left in the world. Outside, the fence Daniel had built stood strong against the night. Inside, everything felt like it was about to break, but they'd face it together. And that, Daniel thought, had to count for something. Monday morning arrived cold and gray, the kind of weather that made everything feel heavier. Daniel woke before dawn and lay in bed staring at the ceiling, running through worst-case scenarios until Noah knocked on his door, asking if he could skip school and come to the courthouse. "No, bud, you've got that math test." "I don't care about the test. I want to be there for Lily." Daniel sat up and looked at his son standing in the doorway in his pajamas, his face serious in a way that made him look older than 9. I know you do. But the best thing you can do for her right now is have a normal day. When she gets home, she's going to need normal. What if she doesn't get to come home? The question hit Daniel in the chest. Then we'll figure it out. But worrying about it now doesn't help anyone. Noah nodded slowly, but Daniel could see he wasn't convinced. He got his son breakfast, made sure he had everything for school, and dropped him off with a promise to text updates. Then he drove to the courthouse, his hands tight on the steering wheel. Victoria was already there when he arrived, standing outside with her lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Catherine, who looked like she ate corporate litigators for breakfast. Victoria wore a navy suit that was probably supposed to make her look professional and composed, but Daniel could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her jaw was clenched. You didn't have to come, Victoria said when she saw him. Yeah, I did. Catherine glanced between them. Mr. Mercer, I need to be clear about something. Richard's legal team is going to paint your relationship with Ms. Hale as evidence of poor judgment. They're going to ask invasive questions, imply things that aren't true, and try to make you look like you're taking advantage of her. Are you prepared for that? I'm prepared to tell the truth. The truth doesn't always win in family court. Then we make it win. Pasiite. Catherine studied him for a moment, then nodded. All right, let's go. The courtroom was smaller than Daniel expected, more like a conference room than the dramatic spaces he'd seen on TV. Richard was already seated with his lawyers, 2 men in expensive suits who looked like they'd never had to worry about a bill in their lives. Richard himself looked calm, confident, like this was just another business negotiation he was sure to win. Lily wasn't there. The judge had decided to interview her separately, away from both parents, which Victoria's lawyer said was standard, but didn't make it any less terrifying. The hearing started with opening statements. Richard's lead attorney went first, laying out a case that painted Victoria as a workaholic who prioritized her company over her daughter, whose recent professional struggles demonstrated instability, and who had recently begun an inappropriate relationship with a man she'd hired to do manual labor around her home. Ms. Hale's judgment is clearly compromised, the attorney said. She's introduced a stranger into her daughter's life during an already tumultuous time, and this relationship raises serious questions about her priorities and decision-making capabilities. Catherine stood for Victoria's opening, and her voice was cold steel. What my client has done is survive. She survived a marriage to a man who abandoned his daughter when she was 4 years old. She survived building a billion-dollar company from nothing while raising that daughter largely alone. She survived a hostile takeover attempt by her own board and came out stronger. And yes, she hired a contractor to repair her property, and yes, a friendship developed. That's called being human. Mr. Hale would like you to believe that strength and vulnerability can't coexist in a parent, but every single parent in this room knows that's a lie. The judge, a woman in her 60s with gray hair and an expression that gave nothing away, made a note and gestured for Richard's team to call their first witness. They called Richard. He took the stand looking every bit the concerned father, voice steady, expression appropriately worried. He talked about how he'd always wanted to be more involved in Lily's life, but Victoria made it difficult, how she controlled access and made him feel like a visitor in his own daughter's world. He described the custody arrangement as unfair, claimed he'd tried repeatedly to negotiate more time and been shut down. And recently, his attorney prompted, have you noticed any changes in Lily's environment? Yes. Victoria hired a man, Daniel Mercer, to work on the property. At first, I thought nothing of it, but then Lily started mentioning him constantly. How he was over all the time, how he brought his son around, how her mother seemed different when he was there. Richard's expression turned concerned. I grew worried. My daughter is being exposed to a relationship that developed under questionable circumstances, with a man Victoria barely knows. And what is your concern specifically? That Victoria is using this man and his son as a way to play house, to create some fantasy of the family life she thinks she's supposed to have. And meanwhile, Lily is caught in the middle, bonding with people who may not be permanent, learning that relationships are transactional. He paused. I want better for my daughter than that. Daniel's jaw tightened. He wanted to stand up and call it the bullshit it was, but Catherine had been clear. Wait your turn. Don't react. Let them show their hand. Catherine's cross-examination was surgical. Mr. Hale, you stated that Ms. Hale made it difficult for you to be involved in Lily's life. Can you provide specific examples? Richard shifted slightly. She was always busy. Work commitments, travel. I'm asking for specific examples where Ms. Hale prevented you from seeing your daughter. Well, there were times when I'd want to take Lily for the weekend and Victoria would say she had tutoring or activities planned. Activities that you were invited to attend? Sometimes. But yes or no, Mr. Hale? Were you invited to attend these activities? Yes. And did you attend? Richard's jaw tightened. Not always. I had work commitments. Well, so to be clear, Ms. Hale included you in Lily's schedule, and you chose not to participate due to work? It's not that simple. It's a yes or no question. Yes, but thank you. Catherine flipped through her notes. You mentioned being concerned about Mr. Mercer's presence in Lily's life. Have you met Mr. Mercer? Briefly. And during that meeting, did he behave inappropriately? No, but did Lily express discomfort with him? Not to me directly. Oh. So your concern is based on what exactly? The fact that your ex-wife has developed a friendship? It's more than friendship. Do you have evidence of that? Photos? Testimony from Lily saying she's uncomfortable? Anything beyond your own assumptions? Richard's face reddened. I know what I've observed. What you've observed during your every other weekend visits. Catherine's voice was sharp. Meanwhile, Ms. Hale has been parenting your daughter full-time for 8 years. But please, tell the court more about your observations. The judge intervened before Richard could respond. Miss Catherine, save the speeches for closing. Mr. Hale, you're excused. Richard stepped down looking less confident than when he'd started, and Daniel felt a small surge of hope. But it died quickly when Richard's team called their next witness, a child psychologist who'd never met Lily, but was there to speak generally about the effects of parental instability on adolescents. The testimony was dry, clinical, and devastating. The psychologist talked about how children Lily's age needed consistency, how introducing new parental figures during custody disputes could create confusion and attachment issues, how professional stress in a parent often manifested as emotional unavailability at home. In your professional opinion, Richard's attorney asked, would it be harmful to a 12-year-old to be exposed to a new romantic relationship during an already stressful custody transition? It can be, yes. Children at this age are particularly sensitive to changes in their primary attachment figures. If the parent is distracted by a new relationship, the child may feel secondary, unimportant. Catherine objected, argued that the psychologist was speaking in generalities without any specific knowledge of Lily's situation, but the damage was done. Daniel could see it in Victoria's face, the fear that maybe they were right, maybe she had been selfish, maybe she was screwing up her daughter's life by letting him in. During the break, they stood in the hallway while Catherine took a phone call. Victoria stared out the window, her arms wrapped around herself. They're making me sound like a terrible mother, she said quietly. They're doing their job. Doesn't make it true. What if it is true? What if I have been putting work first, using you as some kind of band-aid for everything I've been avoiding? Daniel stepped in front of her. Look at me. You're not a terrible mother. Lily knows that. Yeah, you've been focused on work, but you were fighting to keep your company, to keep your livelihood, to keep the life you built for her. That's not selfish. That's survival. And us? What about us? Maybe Richard's right. Maybe I jumped into this too fast, dragged you and Noah into a mess that wasn't yours. Stop. Daniel's voice was firm. You didn't drag us anywhere. I chose to be here. So did Noah. And whatever happens in that courtroom, that doesn't change. Victoria's eyes filled with tears. I'm scared. I know, me too. She leaned into him, and he held her while lawyers and other families moved past them in the hallway. He didn't care what it looked like. She needed someone to hold on to, and he was there. When they went back in, Catherine called her first witness, Victoria's assistant, Marcus, who'd worked for her for 6 years. He testified about Victoria's dedication to Lily, how she'd rearrange meetings to attend school events, how she'd turn down business trips that would make her miss important moments. He described the homeschooling setup Victoria had created so Lily could learn at her own pace, the tutors she'd hired, the enrichment activities she'd organized. Has Ms. Hale ever prioritized work over her daughter's well-being? Catherine asked. Never. Not once. She's turned down major deals because they conflicted with Lily's schedule. I've seen her leave board meetings early for parent-teacher conferences. One time she canceled a call with investors in Tokyo because Lily had a fever and wanted her mom. Marcus looked at Richard. The idea that she's anything less than devoted to that kid is insulting. Then Catherine called Daniel. He took the stand feeling suddenly exposed, aware of every eye in the room. Richard's attorney stood, adjusting his cufflinks like he was about to enjoy this. Mr. Mercer, how long have you known Ms. Hale? About 2 months. And in those 2 months, you've developed a romantic relationship? We've become close, yeah. How would you describe your financial situation, Mr. Mercer? Daniel felt his jaw tighten. I get by. You're a handyman. You work hourly jobs. Would you say Ms. Hale is significantly wealthier than you? Obviously. And that doesn't create a power imbalance? No. Really? She pays you for your work? Invites you into her home, her daughter's life? You don't think there's any element of dependence there? I think I showed up to fix a fence and we became friends. The money doesn't change that. But you have benefited financially from this friendship, haven't you? She's paid you quite well for your services. She's paid me what the work costs. Has she given you anything else? Gifts? Money for your son? No. Never bought dinner? Never offered to help with expenses? Daniel saw where this was going. We've shared meals. Yeah, that's what people do. People in equal relationships, perhaps. But when one person has billions and the other is living paycheck to paycheck, don't those gestures take on a different meaning? Not to me. The attorney smiled like he'd won something. Of course not. But to an outside observer, it might look like you've found a very comfortable arrangement. Catherine objected. The judge sustained it, but again, the damage was done. Daniel stepped down feeling like he'd just been dissected in front of everyone, his life reduced to a narrative about money and power that had nothing to do with what he actually felt. Victoria's turn came last. She took the stand looking exhausted, and Daniel could see the toll this was taking. Richard's attorney went after her methodically, asking about late nights at the office, business trips, board meetings that ran long. He pulled up emails she'd sent at midnight, questioned how someone working those hours could possibly be present for a child. Miss Hale, isn't it true that you've missed multiple of Lily's tutoring sessions this year? Somewhat. A few, yes, when work emergencies came up. How many is a few? I don't have an exact number. More than 5? Probably. More than 10? Victoria hesitated. Possibly. And these work emergencies, they were more important than your daughter's education? That's not fair. It's a simple question. Were they more important? No. But running a company means sometimes you can't control your schedule. And hiring Mr. Mercer? Was that about the fence, or was it about finding someone to fill the gaps you were leaving? Victoria's voice shook. It was about the fence, and then it became about more? Yes. How convenient. A ready-made family to step in when you're too busy with board meetings and hostile takeovers. That's not what happened, isn't it? You hired a man with a son the same age as your daughter, invited them into your home, created this instant domestic situation. Sounds like playing house to me. Catherine objected again, and the judge cut off the line of questioning, but Richard's attorney looked satisfied. He'd planted the seed, made Victoria look desperate, made Daniel look opportunistic, made the whole thing look fake. The judge called a recess and said she'd speak with Lily before making any decisions. They wouldn't reconvene until the next day. Outside, Victoria looked like she might shatter. Catherine tried to reassure her, talk about how they'd presented a strong case, but Victoria wasn't hearing it. As soon as her lawyer left, she turned to Daniel. I'm sorry. For what? For dragging you through that. For letting them twist everything into something ugly. They didn't twist anything. They just made up a story that fit what they wanted to believe. What if the judge believes it? Daniel didn't have an answer for that. They stood in the parking lot while the wind picked up, scattering leaves across the asphalt, and he felt helpless in a way he hadn't since Sarah's funeral, watching someone he cared about suffer and being unable to fix it. "Come on," he said finally. "Let's get out of here." They drove back to the estate in silence. Lily was waiting in the living room with the nanny, and as soon as she saw Victoria, she burst into tears. "I'm sorry," Lily sobbed. "I didn't know what to say. The judge kept asking me questions, and I didn't want to hurt anyone." Victoria pulled her into a hug. "You didn't do anything wrong, sweetheart. Nothing." She asked if I felt safe here, if you were gone a lot, if I wanted more time with Dad. Lily pulled back, her face streaked with tears. I said yes to all of it, because it's all true, but I didn't mean it the way she made it sound. "What do you mean?" "Buchi." "I do feel safe here. I also think you're gone a lot sometimes, but I know why. I understand." Lily's voice cracked. "And yeah, I want more time with Dad, but I don't want to live with him. I want him to actually show up when he says he will, not just when it looks good for lawyers." Victoria looked stunned. "Did you tell the judge that?" "I tried. But she kept asking yes or no questions, and it's not yes or no. Nothing about this is yes or no." Daniel felt something shift in his chest. This kid, she was smart, smarter than any of the adults in that courtroom. She saw through all the legal posturing straight to the truth. That evening, after Lily had cried herself out and gone to bed, Victoria and Daniel sat in the living room. Noah was upstairs reading to Lily, something they'd started doing when she couldn't sleep, and the house was quiet, except for the distant murmur of their voices. "I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow," Victoria said. "None of us do. If she rules against me, if she gives Richard custody, then we deal with it. But we don't assume the worst before we know." Victoria looked at him. "When did you become the optimistic one?" "I'm not optimistic. I'm just stubborn." She almost smiled. "I noticed." They sat in silence for a while, and then Victoria spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. "I meant what I said before about being scared, but it's not just about losing Lily." She met his eyes. "It's about losing this. You, Noah. The way things feel when we're all together. I didn't realize how empty everything was until it wasn't anymore." Daniel's throat tightened. "I know what you mean." "Do you?" "Yeah, after Sarah died, I spent 2 years going through the motions. Getting up, taking care of Noah, working, sleeping, repeat. I wasn't living, I was just surviving. And then I showed up here to fix a stupid fence, and suddenly I remembered what it felt like to want something more than just getting through the day." Victoria's eyes glistened. "What do you want?" "This. You. Whatever future we can build together." He paused. "I know it's complicated. I know we've only known each other a couple months. But I also know I haven't felt this alive in years, and I'm not ready to give that up. Even if it's messy? Especially if it's messy. Perfect doesn't exist, but real does, and this feels real." Victoria leaned forward and kissed him, and this time it wasn't tentative or questioning, it was certain. When they pulled apart, she rested her forehead against his. "Promise me something," she whispered. "Anything. If this goes badly tomorrow, if I lose, promise you won't disappear. Promise you'll help me figure out how to keep being part of her life, even if it's not the way we want." "I promise. And promise you'll let me be part of yours, both of you." "Done." They stayed like that for a long time, holding on to each other in the dark. Two people who'd been alone too long, finally understanding what it meant to not have to carry everything by themselves. Upstairs, Noah's voice drifted down, reading something about dragons and unlikely heroes. Lily laughed at something, and the sound was light, unburdened. For just that moment, everything felt okay. Daniel knew it wouldn't last. Tomorrow would bring answers, and those answers might break everything they'd been building. But tonight, they had this. They had each other. They had two kids who'd found friendship in the middle of chaos, and they had the beginning of something that felt like it might be worth fighting for. The fence outside stood solid in the darkness, rebuilt from broken pieces into something stronger. Daniel looked at Victoria and thought maybe people could do the same thing. Maybe you could take all the fractured parts of your life and build something new, something better. Maybe that's what they'd been doing all along. The next morning would tell them if they'd built it strong enough to last. Daniel barely slept. He kept replaying the hearing in his head, dissecting every question, every answer, every moment where things could have gone differently. Around 4 in the morning, he gave up and made coffee, sitting at his kitchen table in the dark while the rest of the world stayed quiet. His phone buzzed just after 6. Victoria. "Did you sleep?" she asked. "No, you?"
Not really. Lily crawled into my bed around midnight. We just laid there talking until she fell asleep. Her voice was rough. She told me she'd been scared to tell me things.
Scared I'd be disappointed or too busy to listen. "What'd you say?" Stay kantakai. That I was sorry, that I should have asked more, listened better, that I'd been so focused on keeping everything together I forgot to check if she was okay. Victoria paused. "She said she knows I'm trying, that she sees me. I didn't realize how much I needed to hear that." Daniel heard the crack in her voice and wished he was there instead of on the phone. Kids see more than we think. Too much sometimes. They stayed on the line for a while without talking, just the sound of each other breathing, and it was enough. Eventually, Victoria said she needed to get ready, and they agreed to meet at the courthouse. Daniel got Noah up and fed him breakfast while trying to act like today was just another day. Noah didn't buy it. "You're nervous," Noah said, chewing his cereal. "A little. Is Lily going to be okay?" "I don't know, bud. I hope so." Noah set down his spoon. "If she has to live with her dad, can we still see her?" The question hit Daniel hard because he'd been asking himself the same thing all night. "I don't know. Maybe not as much." "That sucks." "Yeah, it does." "She's my best friend, Dad. I don't have a lot of those." Daniel reached across and squeezed his son's shoulder. "I know. Whatever happens, we'll figure it out, but..." Noah nodded, but his face was tight with worry that no 9-year-old should have to carry. Daniel dropped him at school with promises to text the second he knew anything, then drove to the courthouse with his stomach in knots. Victoria was already there with Catherine, both of them looking like they'd been awake as long as he had. Richard stood on the opposite side of the hallway with his lawyers, and when he saw Daniel, something flickered across his face. Satisfaction, maybe, or contempt. Daniel ignored him. "Any idea what the judge is thinking?" Daniel asked Catherine. "None. Family court judges are impossible to read." She checked her watch. "We'll know soon." They filed into the courtroom and took their seats. The judge entered, and everyone stood. When they sat back down, Daniel could feel the tension radiating off Victoria beside him. Her hands were clasped so tight her knuckles had gone white. The judge shuffled some papers, then looked up. Her expression gave nothing away. "I've reviewed all testimony, examined the evidence presented by both parties, and conducted a thorough interview with the minor child in question. This was not an easy decision." She paused, and Daniel felt Victoria stop breathing beside him. "Mr. Hale has raised legitimate concerns about consistency and stability. However, the evidence does not support his characterization of Ms. Hale as an unfit parent. To the contrary, Ms. Hale has demonstrated sustained involvement in her daughter's education, well-being, and emotional development despite significant professional demands." Richard's jaw tightened. "Regarding the concern about Ms. Hale's relationship with Mr. Mercer," the judge continued, "I find no evidence that this relationship has been detrimental to the child. In fact, the minor expressed positive feelings about both Mr. Mercer and his son, describing them as supportive presences during a difficult time. While the relationship is relatively new, that alone does not constitute grounds for altering custody." Victoria's hand found Daniel's under the table. "That said," the judge continued, and Daniel's hope faltered, "I'm concerned about the lack of consistent involvement from Mr. Hale. The minor expressed a desire for more meaningful time with her father. Not more custody, but more presence. She wants a parent who shows up, not one who uses legal proceedings as a substitute for genuine engagement." Richard's face went red. "Therefore, my ruling is as follows. Primary custody remains with Ms. Hale. However, I am modifying the visitation schedule to include 1 weeknight dinner per week with Mr. Hale, in addition to the existing every other weekend arrangement. This is an opportunity, Mr. Hale, for you to build the relationship your daughter is asking for. I suggest you take it seriously." The judge looked at both of them. "I'm also ordering family counseling for all parties. This child is caught between two parents who need to learn how to co-parent effectively. That starts now. She brought down the gavel, and it was over. Daniel felt Victoria's entire body sag with relief. Catherine was talking, explaining next steps, but Daniel wasn't listening. He was watching Victoria try not to cry in the middle of the courtroom, watching Richard storm out with his lawyers trailing behind, watching the weight of months of fear finally lift. Outside, Victoria turned to him and buried her face in his chest. He held her while she shook, her breath coming in short gasps that might have been sobs or laughter, or both. "We did it," she whispered. "You did it." "No, we." She pulled back and looked at him. "I couldn't have done this alone." Catherine cleared her throat. "I hate to interrupt, but we should discuss the counseling requirement. I'll send you some names of family therapists who specialize in Iris. Later, Victoria said. "Please, just give me an hour." Catherine nodded and left them alone in the parking lot. Victoria leaned against Daniel's truck, tipping her face up to the sky. "I want to go get Lily," she said. "I want to tell her it's over, that she doesn't have to worry anymore." "Then let's go." They drove back to the estate, and when they walked in, Lily was sitting on the stairs like she'd been waiting there all morning. She looked up, her face pale and anxious. "Well?" she asked. Victoria knelt in front of her. "You're staying with me. Primary custody doesn't change." Lily's eyes filled with tears. "Really?" "Really. But you'll see your dad more, one dinner a week, plus the usual weekends. And we're all going to therapy to figure out how to make this work better." "Therapy?" "Yeah, together, to help us talk to each other instead of at each other." Lily threw her arms around Victoria's neck, and they stayed like that for a long time. When they finally pulled apart, Lily wiped her eyes and looked at Daniel. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I didn't do anything." "Yeah, you did. You helped my mom not fall apart. That's a big deal." Daniel felt his throat tighten. "Your mom's pretty tough. She would have figured it out." "Maybe, but she didn't have to because you were here." Lily glanced at Victoria. "Can Noah come over? Right?" Victoria laughed, the sound shaky with relief. "Call his school. Tell them it's an emergency and we need him here immediately." "That's lying. Today, I don't care." Daniel called the school, explained there was the family situation, and 20 minutes later Noah burst through the front door, looking panicked, until he saw Lily sitting on the couch. "You're okay," he said. "I'm okay." Noah tackled her in a hug that nearly knocked them both over, and Daniel watched the two of them dissolve into relieved laughter. Victoria stood beside him, and without thinking, he took her hand. "What happens now?" she asked. "I don't know. What do you want to happen?" What? She looked at him, and her expression was open in a way he'd never seen. "I want to stop pretending this is temporary. I want to figure out what it looks like to actually build something together instead of just surviving crisis to crisis." "That sounds good." "Yeah?" "Yeah." She smiled, and it was real and warm and completely exhausted. "I need a nap." "You need a week-long nap." "Probably, but first," she turned to the kids. "Who wants pizza?" They ordered enough pizza to feed a small army and spent the afternoon doing absolutely nothing productive. No work emails, no legal documents, no stress. Just the four of them sprawled in the living room, eating too much and watching movies that required zero brain power. At one point, Lily fell asleep with her head on Victoria's shoulder, and Noah wasn't far behind, curled up on the other end of the couch. Victoria looked at Daniel, and he saw the question in her eyes. "This could be our life," she said softly. "If we wanted it." "Is that what you want?" "I think so. Is it crazy? We barely know each other." "We know enough." Daniel glanced at the kids, then back at her. "I know you're stubborn and terrible at asking for help, and you work too much. I know you love your daughter more than anything, and you're scared of failing her. I know you rebuilt your entire life once, and you're brave enough to do it again if you have to." "That's a lot." "It's enough." And Victoria was quiet for a moment. "I know you're patient and kind, and you don't take shit from anyone even when you probably should. I know you've been through hell and came out the other side still able to care about people. I know Noah is the center of your world and you'd do anything for him.
She paused. And I know I want you in my life. Both of you. Then we're in. Just like that? Just like that. She leaned over and kissed him, careful not to wake Lily, and Daniel felt something settle in his chest, a certainty he hadn't felt in years. This was right. Messy and complicated and definitely too fast, but right. The next few weeks fell into a new rhythm. Daniel still took on jobs around town, but he spent most evenings at the estate. Sometimes he'd fix things, a leaky faucet, a cabinet door that wouldn't close right. Other times, he'd just be there while Victoria worked in her office and the kids did homework at the kitchen table. The family counseling sessions were awkward at first. Richard showed up to the first one looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. And the therapist, a woman named Doctor, Chen, who didn't put up with anyone's bullshit, called him out immediately. "Mr. Hale, you're here physically, but I need you here mentally. This isn't a legal obligation to check off a list. This is about your daughter." Richard shifted uncomfortably. "I understand that. Do you? Because your body language says you think this is a waste of time. I just don't see what we're supposed to accomplish. Victoria has custody. The court decided." "The court decided on a legal arrangement. We're here to figure out the emotional one." Dr. Chen looked at Lily. "What would you like your dad to understand?" Lily looked at her hands. "That I don't need him to be perfect. I just need him to show up. Like, actually show up. Not just physically, but like, pay attention, ask me questions, care about the answers." Richard's face tightened. "I do care." "Then prove it." Lily's voice was quiet but firm. "Stop treating me like a weekend hobby. I'm your daughter, not something you do when you're bored." The words hung in the air, and Daniel saw Richard absorb the hit. To his credit, he didn't deflect or make excuses. He just nodded. "You're right," Richard said finally. "I've been showing up because I'm supposed to, not because I'm really present. That's not fair to you." It wasn't a perfect moment. Richard didn't suddenly transform into Father of the Year. But it was a start, and over the following weeks, Daniel saw small changes. Richard started texting Lily more, not just to confirm pickup times, but to ask about her day. He showed up for the weeknight dinners and actually engaged instead of checking his phone. It wasn't enough to undo years of absence, but it was something. Victoria was changing too. She still worked hard, but she'd started setting boundaries. No emails after 8, no work calls during dinner. She'd even turned down a speaking engagement because it conflicted with Lily's science presentation. "The old me would have gone," she admitted to Daniel one night. She admitted too. "Would have convinced myself the presentation wasn't as important as the networking opportunity. And now I know that's bullshit. Lily's science presentation is more important than any room full of investors." Daniel smiled. "Took you long enough." "Yeah, well, I'm stubborn, remember?" "I might have mentioned that." They were sitting on the back porch, the fence Daniel had built stretching out in front of them. It looked good, solid, straight, like it had always been there. "I've been thinking," Victoria said, "about next steps." "What kind of next steps?" "Us. This." She gestured between them. "I want it to be real. Not just something we're trying out. It is real. I mean legally, officially." She took a breath. "I want you to move in. You and Noah. Not right away, but soon. I want us to be a family, not just people who hang out a lot." Daniel's heart kicked in his chest. "That's a big step." "I know, too big." He thought about his small apartment with the leaky bathroom and the neighbor who played drums at midnight. Thought about Noah's face every time they pulled up to the estate, the way he lit up like he was coming home. Thought about Victoria and Lily and the life they were all building together. "No," he said. "Not too big, just big." Victoria smiled, relief flooding her face. "So that's a yes?" "That's a yes, but we do it slow. Let the kids adjust. Make sure everyone's on the same page." "Agreed." They told Noah and Lily over dinner the following week, framing it as a possibility, something to think about. Noah's reaction was immediate. "Can I have my own room?" Victoria laughed. "Yes, you can have your own room." "With a window?" "Several windows." "Cool, I'm in." Lily was quieter, but Daniel saw the small smile on her face. "Does this mean Noah's officially my brother?" "Not officially," Victoria said,
but close. Close enough.
Lily looked at Daniel. Are you going to be my stepdad? The question caught him off guard. I don't know. Would you want that? Maybe. I've never had a stepdad before. What's it like? I don't know either. We'd have to figure it out as we go. That sounds okay. Lily paused. But you can't try to replace my actual dad.
I know he's not great at showing up, but he's still my dad. I wouldn't try to replace him. I'd just be another adult who cares about you.
Lily considered this. Yeah, okay, that works. It was such a matter-of-fact acceptance that Daniel almost laughed. No drama, no big emotional moment. Just a kid deciding that adding one more person to her corner was fine. They started the transition slowly. Daniel and Noah would stay over on weekends, then a few weeknights. They moved Noah's clothes into one of the spare bedrooms, hung posters on the walls, made it feel like his space. Daniel kept his apartment for a while just in case, but he spent less and less time there. One morning, about 6 weeks after the custody hearing, Daniel woke up in Victoria's bed, a fact that still felt surreal, and realized he'd officially spent more nights at the estate than at his own place. Victoria was already awake, propped against the headboard with her laptop. You're working, he said. Technically, I'm reading. You're reading emails. Same thing. Daniel reached over and closed the laptop.
It's 6 in the morning on a Saturday.
I know. I was just checking.
Nope, no checking. Saturday morning rule, remember? Victoria sighed but smiled. You're very bossy.
You need someone to be bossy.
Maybe. She set the laptop aside and curled into him. This is weird, right? All of this. Good weird, but weird. Definitely weird.
I keep waiting for it to fall apart. Like something's going to happen, and it'll all go back to the way things were.
Daniel understood that fear. He'd felt it constantly in the weeks after Sarah died. The irrational terror that Noah would disappear too, that loss would just keep coming. Nothing's guaranteed, but we're not trying to be perfect. We're just trying to be here. Is that enough?
I think so, yeah.
They lay there quietly, and Daniel heard Noah and Lily laughing about something downstairs.
The sound drifted up through the old house, filling the spaces that used to be so empty.
Later that day, they all drove into town for supplies. Victoria needed stuff for a client presentation, Noah wanted new books, and Lily had been begging for art supplies. They ended up at a massive store that sold everything, and somewhere between the office supply aisle and the craft section, they ran into Tommy's mom. The one Noah had mentioned smiled a lot.
She did smile. A lot. And she looked at Daniel with obvious interest until she noticed Victoria standing beside him.
Oh, she said.
Hi. I didn't know you were… Noah mentioned you had a friend, but this is Victoria, Daniel said, and her daughter, Lily. Tommy's mom's smile became slightly fixed. How nice. Well, we should get going. Tommy has soccer. After she left, Victoria raised an eyebrow. Was that weird? Little bit. She likes you. I gathered that.
Does that happen a lot? Daniel shrugged. Sometimes, single dad. Some people see it as an opportunity. And you?
I was never interested. He took her hand. Too busy fixing fences. Victoria laughed.
And they finished shopping with the kids, arguing over which markers were better and whether glitter was an essential art supply. By the time they got back to the estate, it was late afternoon, and Daniel started making dinner while Victoria helped Lily organize her new supplies, and Noah immediately buried himself in a book. This was their life now. Groceries and school supplies and casual domesticity. It wasn't dramatic or perfect. It was just real. And for Daniel, who'd spent years just trying to survive, real felt like a miracle. That night, after the kids were asleep, Victoria found Daniel sitting on the back porch. The fence was barely visible in the darkness, but he could feel it there, solid and permanent.
You okay? She asked. Yeah, just thinking. About what?
About how I came here to fix a fence and ended up fixing everything else. He looked at her. I know that sounds cheesy, but it's true. I was stuck. Had been for years. And then I met you. And suddenly, there was a reason to be more than just Noah's dad. More than just a guy who fixes things. Victoria sat beside him. You were always more than that.
Maybe.
But I didn't feel like it. And now? Now I feel like I'm part of something, like I matter beyond just being useful. She took his hand. You do. To all of us. They sat there in the dark, two people who'd been broken in different ways, learning what it meant to build something new. Inside, the house was warm and full of life. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, work stress, parenting struggles, the endless logistics of blending two families. But tonight, they had this. They had each other. And the fence Daniel had built stood strong in the darkness, holding everything together the way he'd promised it would. Not perfect, not flawless, but solid enough to weather whatever came next. That, Daniel thought, was all anyone could really ask for. 3 months later, Daniel stood in what used to be the spare bedroom and was now officially Noah's room, helping his son unpack the last boxes from the apartment. They'd finally given up the lease, made it official. This was home now. Where do you want the dinosaur lamp? Daniel asked. Noah looked up from the pile of books he was organizing. Next to the bed. And Dad? Yeah? Thanks. For this. For everything. Daniel felt his throat tighten. You don't have to thank me, bud.
I know, but I want to. Noah went back to his books, and Daniel set down the lamp, wondering when his 9-year-old had gotten so wise.
Downstairs, he could hear Victoria on a call with her board. Things had stabilized at the company after the vote, but she was still rebuilding trust, proving herself all over again. Some days were harder than others. Last week, she'd come home after a particularly brutal meeting and just sat in the kitchen staring at nothing until Lily came down and wordlessly made her tea. Those were the moments that mattered, not the victories, but the small acts of showing up when things were hard. Daniel finished helping Noah set up his room and headed down to find Victoria in her office. She was off the phone now, rubbing her temples. Headache? He asked. Migraine. Board wants to accelerate the timeline on the new product launch. I told them we're not ready, but they're not listening. So don't do it. She looked at him like he'd suggested she burn down the building. I can't just refuse it. Why not? You already proved you belong there. You don't have to keep proving it every single day. That's not how business works. Maybe that's the problem. Daniel sat on the edge of her desk. You spent months fighting to keep control of your company. Don't let them take it back by making you so busy proving yourself that you forget why you wanted it in the first place. Victoria stared at him, and he saw the exhaustion in her eyes. I don't know how to do it differently. Then learn. Same way you learned everything else, by trying and screwing up and trying again. She almost smiled. You make it sound simple. It's not simple, but it's also not impossible. Victoria sighed and leaned back in her chair. There's a leadership conference next month in Seattle, 3 days. I already committed to speaking, but you don't want to go. I don't want to leave. Lily has her recital, Noah has his field trip, and She shook her head. I don't want to miss things anymore. Then don't go. I already said yes. So say no now. Tell them something came up. Tell them the truth. That your family is more important than a conference. Victoria looked torn. What if they think I'm not committed? Well, let them think whatever they want. You know the truth. She sat with that for a moment, then picked up her phone and typed out an email. Daniel watched her hesitate before hitting send, then actually do it. There, she said. Done. How do you feel? Terrified. Relieved. Both. That sounds about right. She stood and wrapped her arms around him, and Daniel held her, thinking about how much had changed since that first morning when she'd called him about a fence. Back then, she'd been so tightly controlled, so convinced she had to handle everything alone. Now she was learning to let go, to trust that the world wouldn't fall apart if she wasn't holding it together every second. That evening, they had their first official family dinner in the formal dining room, a space Victoria admitted she'd barely used in years because it felt too big for just her and Lily. But now there were 4 of them, and it felt right. Lily had made place cards, putting way too much effort into decorating them with glitter and drawings. Noah's had a T-Rex on it. Daniel's had a hammer. Victoria's had what might have been a computer, or possibly a very angular cat. It's a laptop, Lily said when Victoria squinted at it. I love it. They ate pasta that Daniel had made. Nothing fancy, just the recipe Sarah used to make that Noah still requested on bad days. Halfway through dinner, Lily's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and made a face. Dad wants to switch weekends again, says he has a work thing. Victoria's expression tightened, but she kept her voice neutral. What do you want to do?
I don't know. He does this a lot. Lily set down her fork. Like, I get that he has work, but so do you, and you figure it out. Your dad's trying, Victoria said carefully. Is he?
Because it feels like he's trying until it's inconvenient, and then he just bails. Daniel saw Victoria struggle with what to say. The therapy sessions had helped, but Richard still had a habit of canceling last minute, always with a good excuse. Each time it happened, Lily got a little harder, a little less willing to give him chances. You want my opinion? Daniel asked. Lily looked at him. Yeah, I think your dad loves you. I also think he doesn't know how to make you a priority because nobody ever taught him how. That doesn't make it okay, but it's not your job to fix him.
So what do I do? You decide what you're willing to accept. If he cancels, you tell him how it makes you feel. If he keeps doing it, you stop expecting different. Daniel paused. But you don't stop being his kid. You just stop being responsible for his choices. Lily absorbed this quietly. What if he never changes? Then he doesn't, and that's sad and it sucks, but it's on him, not you. That's kind of depressing. Yeah, but it's also freeing.
You can't control what he does. You can only control how you respond. Lily nodded slowly, then picked up her phone and typed out a response. She showed it to Victoria before sending, I'm disappointed you're canceling again. If you want to reschedule, I need you to commit and actually follow through. I'm tired of getting excited and then let down. Victoria's eyes widened. That's very direct. Is it too much? No, it's perfect. Lily hit send, and Daniel saw the weight lift slightly from her shoulders. She was learning what Victoria was learning. That honesty was hard, but it was better than pretending everything was fine. The following week, Richard actually showed up for his scheduled dinner. He took Lily to a nice restaurant downtown, and when he brought her back, he came to the door instead of just dropping her off. Can I talk to you? He asked Victoria. She glanced at Daniel, who nodded and took the kids inside. Through the window, he watched Victoria and Richard stand on the porch, having what looked like an intense conversation. It lasted maybe 10 minutes, and when Victoria came back in, she looked shaken. He apologized, she said, for the custody fight, for being inconsistent with Lily, she shook her head. For a lot of things. You believe him? I don't know. Maybe. He seemed genuine. Victoria sank onto the couch. He said he's been jealous. Of this. Of you and Noah. Of how easily you fit into Lily's life when he's been struggling for years. That's not my fault. No. And he knows that. He said he's been using work as an excuse because it's easier than admitting he doesn't know how to connect with her. Victoria looked at Daniel. I told him the truth, that you didn't replace him, you just showed up. And if he wants to actually be her father instead of a visiting obligation, he needs to do the same. What'd he say? That he'd try. That's all he said. I'll try. It wasn't much, but it was something. Over the next few months, Richard did try. He stopped canceling. He started actually listening when Lily talked instead of just nodding while checking his phone. He showed up to her recital and sat through the whole thing without leaving early. It wasn't a transformation, just incremental change. The kind that happens when someone finally decides to care more than it's uncomfortable. In December, the first major storm of winter hit. Daniel had been watching the forecast all week, and when the warnings escalated, he made sure everything outside was secured. The fence, the patio furniture, anything that could get damaged or become a projectile. The storm came in hard around midnight, wind that sounded like it was trying to tear the roof off, rain hammering against the windows in sheets. Daniel lay awake listening to it, Victoria curled against his side. Think the fence will hold? She murmured. It better. I built it. She smiled in the dark, confident, realistic. I didn't half-ass it. The wind howled louder, and somewhere outside, something crashed. Daniel got up to check, pulling on jeans and a hoodie. Victoria followed him downstairs where Noah and Lily were already standing at the window watching the storm. That was the trellis, Lily said, pointing to the mangled remains of the decorative structure that used to be on the side of the house. Great. That was original to the house. Want me to check the fence? Daniel asked. In this weather? You'll get blown away. I'll be careful. Oh. He grabbed a flashlight and headed out into the storm. The wind immediately tried to knock him over, rain soaking through his clothes in seconds. He made his way to the back fence, the beam of the flashlight cutting through the darkness. The fence stood solid. Not a single board out of place, not one post leaning. The wind tore at it, but it held exactly like Daniel had designed it to. He stood there in the freezing rain, water running down his face, and felt an absurd surge of pride. This thing he'd built, it was doing its job. When he came back inside, dripping water all over the floor, Victoria handed him a towel. Well, solid, didn't even flex. You look pleased with yourself. Maybe a little. She kissed him, cold rain and all, and they stood in the kitchen while the storm raged outside and the kids argued about whether they should make hot chocolate. By morning, the storm had passed, leaving debris scattered across the property. The trellis was destroyed, several trees were down, and the pool was full of branches. But the fence stood undamaged, a clean line against the chaos everywhere else. They spent the day cleaning up, all four of them working together to haul branches and clear pathways. Richard even showed up to help, surprising everyone, including himself. He and Daniel worked side by side, clearing a fallen tree, and it was awkward at first until Richard finally broke the silence. "You're good for her," Richard said, "for both of them." Daniel didn't know what to say to that. "Thanks. I mean it. I was angry at first, felt like you were taking something that should have been mine, but I never put in the work. You did." Richard paused. "That fence you built, it's a good fence." "It's just a fence." "No, it's not." Richard looked at him. "I know what it represents. Stability. Someone who shows up and follows through. That's what they needed. What I never gave them." "You're here now." "Yeah, trying to be." Richard picked up another branch. "For what it's worth, I'm glad Lily has you. She deserves adults who don't let her down." It was the most honest conversation they'd had, and Daniel respected Richard for having it. They finished clearing the tree in silence, and when Richard left, he hugged Lily tight and promised to see her Thursday for their regular dinner. "Think he means it?" Lily asked after he'd driven away. "I think he's trying to," Victoria said. "That's better than nothing." "Yeah, it is." As winter turned to spring, life settled into something that felt almost normal. Daniel took on fewer jobs, focusing on projects that let him be home more. Victoria promoted someone to COO, delegating responsibilities she'd been clinging to for years. The kids flourished. Noah made the soccer team. Lily started writing short stories and reading them aloud at dinner. One evening in April, Daniel was fixing a cabinet in the kitchen when Victoria came in looking nervous. "Can we talk?" "Sure, what's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. She twisted her hands together. "I've been thinking about something." Daniel set down his screwdriver. "Okay, we've been together almost a year now, living together for 6 months. And I know it's fast and we're still figuring things out, but," she took a breath, "I want to make this permanent, legal. I want us to be a real family." Daniel's heart kicked in his chest. "Are you asking what I think you're asking?" "I'm asking if you'll marry me. Not right away, but eventually. When we're both ready. I need to know if that's where this is going, because if it is, I want to plan for it. I want to be intentional about it." Daniel stared at her, this woman who'd been so closed off a year ago, now standing in front of him, asking him to build a future together. "Yes. Yes? Yeah. Yes. Eventually. When we're both ready." He pulled her close. "I love you. I love this. I love what we're building." Victoria's eyes filled with tears. "I love you too. I've been terrified to say it because every time I love something, it falls apart. But I love you, and I love Noah, and I love that we're doing this impossible, messy, complicated thing together." They stood there holding each other in the kitchen while the evening light faded, and somewhere upstairs the kids laughed about something. This was their life now, not perfect, not easy, but real. Built on a foundation of honesty and work, and showing up even when it was hard. That summer, they took a trip together, just the four of them, a week at a cabin by a lake. No work emails, no schedules, just time to be together. They swam and fished and sat around the campfire telling stories. One night, after the kids had gone to bed, Daniel and Victoria sat watching the stars reflect on the water.
I used to think strength meant doing everything alone, Victoria said quietly, proving I didn't need anyone. But that's not strength. That's just fear dressed up as independence. What is strength then? This, letting people in, building something with someone instead of just for someone. She looked at him. You taught me that. I didn't teach you anything. You figured it out yourself. With help, that's the point. She leaned against him. We're better together than we ever were apart. Daniel thought about that. Thought about the man he'd been a year ago, surviving but not living, going through motions, convinced the best parts of his life were behind him. And now here he was, watching stars with the woman he loved, their kids asleep inside, a future stretching out ahead of them that actually looked like something worth building toward. Yeah, he said, we are. By the time they returned from the trip, summer was in full swing. Daniel had been working on a project in the garage, building a treehouse for the kids in the massive oak at the edge of the property. Noah and Lily had been begging for one, and Daniel figured if he was going to build something, it might as well be something they'd actually use. The day he finished it, they had an official unveiling. The kids climbed up the ladder and immediately claimed opposite corners, already arguing about whose side was whose and whether they needed a password to enter. Think it'll last? Victoria asked, watching them. The treehouse? Yeah, built it solid. I meant us. Daniel looked at her. Yeah, I think it will. Not because everything's perfect, but because we keep showing up. That's what lasts. Not the easy parts, but the commitment to work through the hard ones. Very philosophical. I have my moments. She smiled and took his hand, and they stood there watching their kids play in the treehouse, the fence Daniel had built visible in the background, the house they now shared rising behind them. A year ago, none of this existed. Now it was everything. The following winter, another storm rolled through. This one was worse than the last. Ice and wind and temperatures that dropped below freezing for days. The power went out around midnight, and they all huddled in the living room with blankets and flashlights, the fireplace working overtime. Think the fence made it? Noah asked. Only one way to find out, Daniel said. In the morning, they bundled up and went outside to survey the damage. Trees were down, power lines were destroyed. Half the neighborhood looked like a disaster zone. But when they reached the back fence, it stood exactly as it had before. Solid, straight, unmarked by the storm. Daniel ran his hand along the wood, checking for cracks or weakness. Nothing. It had held. How did you know? Victoria asked. When you built it, how did you know it would be strong enough? I didn't. Not completely, but I used good materials, set the foundation deep, and didn't cut corners. That's all you can do. Build it right and hope it holds. Sounds like a metaphor. Everything's a metaphor if you think about it hard enough. She laughed, and they walked back to the house together, the kids running ahead. Inside, they'd lost most of the food in the fridge and the house was freezing, but they had each other and a fireplace and enough blankets to survive. That night, after they'd eaten a makeshift dinner and the kids were asleep, Daniel and Victoria sat by the fire. The house was quiet except for the occasional crack of ice falling from the trees outside. You know what I think? Victoria said. What? I think the fence isn't the metaphor. It's the proof. Proof of what? That you can take something broken and build it into something strong. That you can survive storms if you're willing to do the work. She looked at him. That's what you did. What we did. We took all our broken pieces and built something that could hold. Daniel thought about that, about the fence, about this family, about everything they'd survived and everything still ahead. She was right. They'd built something strong, not because it was perfect, but because they'd been willing to show up and do the work, even when it was hard, even when they didn't know if it would hold. Yeah, he said. I guess we did. Years from now, Daniel would think back to this moment, the two of them sitting by the fire while a storm raged outside, their kids safe upstairs, a fence standing solid in the darkness. He'd think about the man he'd been when he first answered Victoria's call, and the man he'd become since.
He'd think about all the things he'd lost and all the things he'd found,
And he'd realize that the strongest things in life were never built quickly. They were built slowly, patiently, with care and intention and the willingness to show up every single day.
They were built deep enough to survive the pressure, flexible enough to bend without breaking, and honest enough to acknowledge the cracks without pretending they didn't exist. The fence he'd rebuilt around Victoria's estate was never just a fence. It was a promise that broken things could be fixed, that strong foundations mattered, that the work was worth it even when you couldn't see the results yet.
And as Daniel sat there with Victoria beside him, and their children safe in the house they'd made into a home,
He understood something fundamental about love and family and the life he'd thought was over when Sarah died. It wasn't over. It had just been waiting for him to be ready to build something new. Not perfect, not flawless, not without its struggles and storms and moments of doubt, but strong, deep, built to last. And that, Daniel thought, was more than enough.